it's funny. I started with a battle school, with a battle room, the idea of training in space. And I didn't even know it was going to be children until the day that I sat there and started the first draft. I had gone with a girl I was dating up to take her boss's kids to the circus, and they had tickets for everybody but me. So I was out on the front lawn of the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City, and I thought, wow, the battle room, what if they were training children? That'd be a much better age to train people to not be involved in to get rid of the sense of Earth's gravity and to get used to the idea of three-dimensional space. Take them when they're young. And so with that idea in mind, I thought, okay, the training army is all kids and the commander is a kid. And so I wrote the word Ender's Game because of end game from chess. And I thought, okay, the kid's name is Ender. And that was it. I mean, so I had no idea who he was, had no thought about him. He was what he did. And the story ended up being popular. And so I started working with Ender. He was just the stock romantic hero at first. But when I wrote the novel, I was putting in much more serious military thinking and gave him a background and gave him a family. I kind of gave him mine. Twisted, perverted, but still, sort of based on mine. And he kind of grew in the telling, but what really brought him to life for me was Speaker for the Dead. Was seeing who he was in the aftermath, who he was when he had taken responsibility, though not blame, but responsibility for the end of a species, the terrible things that happened in war. It's a horrible burden for anybody to bear. I mean, many soldiers feel it. Even though they didn't start the war, they were doing their duty. Nevertheless, it's still you doing those things, and it changes you. And so working with him in Speaker for the Dead and Xenocide and Children of the Mind, I began to find out who he was. Now, I already had some sense of it from the novel Ender's Game, but I went back and approached it again with Ender's Shadow, where I was seeing Ender through Bean's eyes and really through the eyes of the other kids, and began to appreciate more what Ender meant to them instead of just what he meant to himself. And so when I wrote Ender in Exile, I was finally able to show who he really was. I really felt like I had come to an understanding of this character. But the character as I originally wrote him, obviously wasn't bad. He was acceptable to the audience. They supplied what I had not supplied in the original character. But 25 years later, when I wrote Ender in Exile, I was able to take Ender at the end of the war and move forward through how he responded immediately afterward, how he became a man who could lead much older and more experienced people than himself. Now, the funny thing is that the real fantasy portion of Battle School is not the school itself. It's the testing procedure that gets you there. Since writing Ender's Game, I have learned so much about how testing, intelligence testing, and so forth works that I have nothing but contempt for the idea that my whole book depends on, that you can test little children and determine what their aptitudes and abilities are going to be in those areas, because so much really is a matter of choice and preference. And the studies of geniuses, the people who, the idea that it takes 10,000 hours to produce a genius in the arts or whatever. And I realized I did put in my 10,000 hours writing. I don't know if genius is what we got, but I did put in the 10,000 hours, and that actually, for me, is a better model of how these things work than the model I use in Ender's Game, where you just test people for inborn aptitude. So that's the place where I'd have to say Battle School is not realistic. Who would you send there? How would you choose them? I don't think it would work. But having said that, I also think that it's true that getting the control of the education of children can allow you to shape them in powerful ways. For me, personally, Battle School would have been hell. There are only a handful of truly great generals in history that we know about. Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Stonewall Jackson's one of them. They had the ability to win the love, the absolute devotion of their men, including the officers who were close to them. I mean, that's two very different publics to deal with. Now, we had some that won the devotion of their men, like George McClellan. The trouble with McClellan was he never knew what to do with them. And they got fed up with him eventually because he didn't waste them. That is, he didn't throw them into battle for nothing. He just didn't throw them into battle at all. They didn't accomplish anything. And so he was popular without being effective. Then we had some like William Tecumseh Sherman, who was effective without being popular. And so his men served him well, and they were used well. People complain about Sherman's march to the sea, but it was a brilliant, bold military maneuver, and he carried it off perfectly. But you look at Stonewall Jackson and his foot cavalry, as they called themselves. They were infantry, and he could march them so fast and so far that he would show up in places that his opponents never thought that he could possibly be. That's Ender Wiggin, is he had the devotion of the people under him. It's not just that he was brilliant, but that his underlings did their best for him. Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow are parallel. They begin and end in roughly the same point in history, and they go through the same events, take place in some of the same settings. Battle school. Most of both books take place in battle school, but that was not my plan. My plan was to write a book about Bean, and then write a book about Petra, and then write a book about each of the other kids. It was going to be a series of books. The original plan was for me not even to write them. We were going to sort of have collaborative writers. I would set up a Bible for the future history, and then other writers would each take a character and follow that character through. But I have no idea now what I was even planning to have the novel be about, because once I got Bean on the streets of Rotterdam, that took so much longer just to get him to battle school than I thought it would. And by then I had this amazing character, Ashia, that just took over, like the mule took over Asimov's Foundation trilogy. Just thought, what am I going to do with this guy? And I brought him up to battle school and made him somebody up there too. And I realized that Bean's story was going to end right where Ender's story ended, and I had a parallel novel quite by accident. So it wasn't my plan ever